Holy Happy Hour Batman! I am Ben. I'm an Episcopal priest, co-founder of the All Ports Open Network, TTRPG enthusiast, and yeah, that's me. On this show, Holy Happy Hour Batman, I am joined by heroes of the gaming and geek world to talk all about things like life, faith, spirituality, game design philosophy, what's going on in the TTRPG scene, and literally anything else that comes up that we feel like talking about. This week, I am going to be joined by Avraham Baez. I'm very excited about this conversation. As a Puerto Rican Hasidic Jewish game designer, he brings an extremely interesting perspective to the analog gaming space. Like I said, I'm really excited to have this conversation in just a few minutes, and he's able to join me this week. A few things before we get into the show itself. Holy Happy Hour Batman is a production of allportsopen.com. Check out our website for our lineup of podcasts and streams, sharing, making, and talking about great stories with shows like the hit horror audio drama Weeping Cedars, my own teen superhero show that I do. It's a podcast called Delinquent Comics, and so much more. Stick around after this episode of Holy Happy Hour Batman, because if you're watching this on Twitch, we're going to raid. Let's take all of you watching, if you don't know what a raid is, right into our Monday night actual play TTRPG game. The Monday Night Crew is terrorizing the open seas as pirates or something, I think. Something like that. It's a really fun fantasy pirate adventure. It's been hilarious week to week. It's a fabulous cast on the Monday Crew. So stick around on Twitch and you'll be able to check it out. If you're on YouTube or you're watching this on Facebook right now, you'll see it come up after Holy Happy Hour Batman on those formats as well. So before we get into that, it is happy hour, and so I have a drink here up on the screen. So I was like, how am I going to create a drink inspired by Avraham? What kind of drink will I make? So sometimes what I do when I'm having a guest on the show is I will look through the guests' game library, games they've designed. So I thought, what more fun game could there be to create a cocktail inspired by than the game Mom, Dad, I Summoned a Demon and Now We're Getting Married. So this drink in front of you I called the Devil's Nuptials. Anything that has to do with the devil, I feel super inspired to make a drink about for whatever reason. It is because this is also based on a classic cocktail. It's inspired by a classic cocktail, the Devil's Cocktail. So in this version of that, I have 2 ounces of tawny port, an ounce of scotch to give it some smokiness, like the fire and brimstone smokiness is sort of what I was conjuring up in my mind. A half ounce of fresh squeezed lemon juice, fresh cracked pepper. So there's like a little bit of like a lemon pepper thing going on to it. So all you do is you combine those things into a cocktail shaker, with ice, shake it up really good, strain it really, really well so you don't get any of that cracked pepper into it, strain it really, really well into a cool glass, and that is the drink, the Devil's Nuptials. So that is the drink for this week. As always, if you make this cocktail, you are legally obligated and required to share with me your experience of drinking it. Not really, obviously, but I'd love it if you did. If you go on to my Twitter account, @BenjaminWallace, in like 2 minutes, the recipe card for this cocktail will be there. It'll tweet on its own as we're doing the show in about 1 minute, so you'll be able to check it out. So, all right, that's I made it through the intro real fast tonight, which is great because it gives us more time. So let's go ahead and, by the power of the internets, bring Avraham onto the show here. So, Avraham, welcome to Holy Happy Hour Batman.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you for coming on. I had Gabrielle Rabinowitz, a friend of yours, on. She came on with her cousin Ben, and they talked about Manish Tana. And afterward, and you came up in the course of that first episode, and your name came up. Sorry, I'm drinking some water. And then afterward, she's like, you gotta have him on Avraham on the show, and I'm like, I would love to. I would absolutely love to, of course. So thank you for being gracious and making time quickly and during a busy time of year. So.
Yeah, it worked out really well with the timing.
Good. Yeah, it really did for me. If you hadn't been on the show tonight, there probably wouldn't have been a show tonight. If there's a bleeping for folks listening, I'm really sorry. Oh, you know what? Your audio is not coming through at all, so I'm glad I actually caught that. So, oh no, you are. Never mind. When you weren't talking, I didn't see it come through. If there's a bleeping coming through for our audience, it's because I don't know how to make Google Messenger stop bleeping at me, like without. And then let's see. Can I make a confession to you as to why I got to stop? As to why it's bleeping at me? Would you like to know? It's ridiculous.
Sure.
Okay, we're going off topic real quick, and then we'll go back on topic. I promise. All right, I got an app that my friend Blaine Martin, who's also he has a podcast called You're Not Alone, and he's a game designer. He turned me on to. Have you ever seen the Wombo app? You put selfies in it, and it makes them sing. And, yeah, so it makes them sing. You put a selfie in it. You can put your selfie in it, but here's the thing: you can also put historical figures in it. So like I put in like C.S. Lewis and had him singing. I did one of C.S. Lewis and J.R.R. Tolkien singing. So my friend saw me tweet about this, and he's just sending me pictures of celebrities like the Queen of England and different people, and like asking me to turn them into like songs for him to and send them back to him. So that's the ridiculousness that's happening in the background as this is going on.
Nice.
Yeah, and so I was saying to Avraham before the show for our audience that the energy level we brought tonight is completely different with very, very professional looking religious texts. like I don't. Maybe when I'm moving soon and I'm going to make a new stream space, so maybe I'll do that because I do have like a billion religious books that I could make a nice, background for. So anyway, that's enough about me. Avraham, give us one of the things I like to ask people on the show is like about their origin story. So I feel like there's probably like, obviously it's one origin story, but there's probably like multiple angles for it. There's like your TTRPG origin story, sort of your religious background. And I want to talk about all of that. I guess wherever it makes sense for you to start telling your origin story, I'd like to just kind of dig into it.
Yeah. So I was, I'm a born and raised New Yorker. My family was not religious. I was born Jewish, but we were not religious in any sense. I kind of started seeking a spiritual path in my life, kind of very young and early on. Started through like learning going to a Reform synagogue in the neighborhood I grew up in, and then kind of that petered out for a little bit. But then later on in life, during my college years, that was when I started to kind of delve in more into my religion, into my ancestry and background. And after I graduated college, I spent about 2 years roughly in a yeshiva and in a Jewish seminary. And from that point on, I think I've been doing this for maybe 15 or 20 years as living my life as a Hasidic Jew. We call the people who do that are Bali Tshuvas, people who kind of return back to their Jewish roots and start taking on mitzvahs and commandments. The word itself actually translates to like master of return, but I am no master, whatever. I think it's a constant daily learning and growing, and really that's the beauty of it. We have an infinite God, and there is infinite places to explore, to continue to go into. And so that was kind of where my religious path came. My game path was kind of also in this strange kind of inspiration area where it was just role-playing games kind of fascinated me. I definitely, there was D&D is such an open and obvious one there. So I saw those books first and wanted to get it. And then I think as many role-playing game people find themselves, you have all these books, you bought all this dice, and you're like, oh no, I need someone to play this with. And so it was like trying to like build up that community in that area and like looking for different places and spaces to learn. I did a lot of kind of like the Roll20 games and like finding people to play with there, and then just kind of moved on from there. But then there's a local comic book store in my neighborhood called Anyone Comics, and they started having Dungeons and Dragons games being played there. And so I came in, and it was actually my wife who was like, "Oh yeah, he runs games. You should have him run games." And I started to move further away from Dungeons and Dragons and exploring more indie games. And so I was running a game of the Sprawl for a while as a cyberpunk role-playing game.
Yeah, Sprawl's an awesome game.
Yeah, and I was doing that for a while, and so I said, yeah, I could run that, or I could run, I think, Apocalypse World. I think Apocalypse World was my first one that I ran at the store in person, and from there, the people that come to the games. I had my very close, my friend Morgan was another person there that we kind of together started trying to build up a gaming community in Brooklyn. And so we started that maybe 3 years ago. And we've been trying to continue to play games together, mostly in person. And it really was like a chance for us to be able to say, well, we bought all these games, now let's just try them out.
Yeah.
And so it was nice because we kept on doing like, well, how about this game, or how about this game? And we had this wonderful group just building around us that were just like totally down for just like, yeah, let's try this one. And we switch it up a lot and get to try out and explore a lot of different games. And so that was kind of my interest in the actual gaming. And then game designing was, I don't know, like it also was just like, all right, well, let me try this. I had this idea for a game, it's called Trapped, and it is a game that uses the events of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. For those who don't know, Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was one of the, probably one of the worst industrial murders that happened in America, in which people were locked in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory in the 1900s, and they were in sweatshops in this time period, and they were basically given poor pay and stuck in this building working. The managers locked them in this building. A fire erupted from someone smoking a cigarette, and it killed 147 people, mostly women and immigrants. And it was a really big spark in the labor movement to get some changes, labor safety, better pay for them. And so I wanted to take this, like these events that occurred, you know, there was a massive strike that occurred beforehand, and then there was the fire, and then there was a trial in which the managers of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory got off completely scot-clean. And not only did they get off, they wound up getting charged for the exact same crime as locking the doors just a few years later after this. So for me, the events of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory was a kind of an image, a mirror that we can put up and say, like, these are the horrible events that happened in labor back then, but can we still see the ripple effects of these horrible practices in today? And what are those struggles that is kind of a continuation and tie us back to our history, bad and good, that is continuing to this day. And so that was the game that I was designing. Yeah,
tell us about Trapped. You know, how does that game? Somebody might hear that and be like, "How does that turn into a game?" Like, yeah.
Yes. So for me, the way the game works is that it's broken up into 3 scenes, and you come together, you create your own company, and the company has its own company traits. Like manipulative, one of my favorites is that, you know, it's a family oriented, we're all family here, kind of things. And these are just traits that the company can use against the employees. All the players play as different employees of this company, and something occurred that kind of pushes everyone to want something more. There's an event that kind of like leads off. And then I have these prompts based off of what scene you're doing. So there's the strike phase, the fire phase, and then the trial phase. And we have prompts based off of the things that have occurred during the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. And I take these prompts and I just apply them to the characters themselves during this time in whatever, the game is usually set in a modern setting, like today. And so they apply it for that point, and they're just trying to work through their characters' lives. And I try to make it very realistic and humanizing, because it's easy for us to just sit down to a table and be like, we go on strike, the union wins, we all form the union, and then we live our lives.
Right.
But I wanted a story in which there is going to be a pull between realistic issues. It's not so simple to say that I can go on strike one day and not have money coming in.
Yeah.
And so that is kind of like what the centers the game. It's kind of got affected negatively about like many things based off of this pandemic, because there's a sewing mechanic in the game. So you collectively stitch together a garment or like a little swatch together during the course of the play. And that doesn't really translate over well virtually.
Yeah. Have you had to design any concessions to playing it virtually given, or have you not bothered replacing those mechanics?
No, I haven't bothered to replace it because I felt it was such a strong aspect of the game. Like, there's this part where you're just kind of faced with like sewing, and for people who have not sewn, I think it's great because it just kind of gives you a look into the world of doing it, the physical aspect of sewing, but also kind of like the struggle with it. Like, you are tasked to kind of create something with not optimal situation, and you just kind of have to do your best. There's also this very long tradition of our stories exist within our garments. And like from the clothes that we wear, from tapestries, garments hold an extremely important place, and woven materials and all of these made fabrics, all of those things have such a strong place in storytelling and tradition. And I really wanted to connect that as well.
Just out of curiosity, do you feel like that's like a Hasidic insight? Like, because there's something that strikes me. I mean, obviously that's an important part of, your tradition, like the idea of story being in the clothes that you wear.
Yeah. So one of the things was that the majority of the women and men that died or worked in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory were recent immigrants from Russia and Italy. So they were Jewish people and they were Italian people. So this story itself kind of has a lot of Jewish roots to it. But also, yes, definitely. I felt that I have this one mechanic in it where if you get there's a kind of a positive result and a negative result dice roll. So if you get the negative result dice roll, you have to take the garment and you have to like rip it. And that comes very specifically from Jewish tradition of when Jews mourn, when someone passes away that's close to us, we rip our clothes for that passing. And so that was taken specifically from my traditions.
It seems like it would be a really intense game to play. I'm curious if it plays as dark as it sounds like it could be potentially.
Potentially, there are some definitely like serious moments within it, and I think that in game design itself, you kind of have to think about this, and part of that is like the sewing mechanic itself kind of helps with that. So when the player scene is over, that's when they kind of move into the sewing part. And the sewing part is kind of like this quiet moment where they don't really have to speak, like or be back inside the fiction. They could just be with their sewing. And I kind of use that as like a pacing mechanism to try to like hold people back from if the scene was intense. But I think a lot of these games deal with kind of negative subjects also have to deal with an aspect of hope. You know, there has to be some way that a person can find hope within it. And I asked like the one ending question, the last prompt is like, what was one thing that could have been existed or happened to these workers that could have changed their situation? And so much like I want to have this game as a continuation of history, it's a tie back from not just the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory to us today. I want people who play the game to be able to take it and see it and apply it to their day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
Like, what could I do to better the lives of another person, to better the lives of another worker?
Yeah, and just curious if there was stuff in your life that, like, obviously designing like your first, especially if it's your first game, but designing a game that's sort of like oriented towards labor in that way, towards like the ethics of labor. That's a very particular choice for a game design, and I'm curious if there was background that you had that sort of led you to want to make that your sort of first game. Do you have like a you know, that concern for labor ethics background?
Yeah. I was very fortunate enough to grow up. My mother worked in the union almost my entire life. My father worked in the garment industry my entire life for what he did, and so understanding labor and you know, my family kind of came from very much the union strong kind of organizing aspect, and so like I have kind of that history and connection to it from them. My grandfather, who I'm named after, he passed away before I was born. And so he was very involved in organizing in his days and age. It didn't always go so well for him because it wound up that he was the one who got fired and the family had to just kind of deal with that aspect. But he was extremely a strong believer in getting people their fair share. And so I'm, you know, currently I'm also part of the union at my job that I work in. And so, you know, those things just resonate within me, and being within the garment industry and kind of growing up around it and within it and seeing what happens, really inspired me to do this game.
That's cool. Well, I picked a different game when I made the drink earlier, obviously. And one that perhaps is less serious and intense. The picking Mom, Dad, I summoned a demon, and now we're getting married. I say I could have picked that. I don't even know what drink I would have made, honestly, inspired by the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. Like, I feel like there's probably a good way to do that. I just don't know if I know what that is. But so you've done more lighthearted games than Trapped.
Yeah, I definitely needed to be able to do that. But that game itself as well, like I actually designed that game based off of my experience dealing with something that my parents couldn't understand, because mind you, they were not religious. And so I kind of took on this entire life, and I started going on Shidduch dating, which means that like we had a matchmaker who kind of paired my wife and I up. We went on a total of about 5 dates together, and these were just kind of intense conversation dates. We would go to like a place to just sit and talk to each other and just kind of like get to know each other in this way and see what our lives are like and what our lives want it to be. And it takes an intense understanding of oneself to be able to kind of go through this process. But after 5 dates, you know, I came to my mom and dad and I said, okay, I'm going to get married. And, you know, it definitely freaked them out because it's just not to their, you know, the world that they understand. And so I was like, I wonder if there's a way that I could convey that weirdness of being, and later on, I'm now a parent myself, and I'm thinking about my relationship as both the child and as the parent. And I'm thinking like, there's going to be a time where my child's going to do something that's completely outside of my conceptual idea and framework of what I understand and the way that I raised my children. And how do I how do I deal with that in the way that both my parents still love and supported me, and thankfully, thank God. And I wanted to create a game in which you played this parent and child relationship. Someone plays a parent, someone plays a child. And the one condition of it is the relationship stands with love. You absolutely love each other. And nothing will change that aspect of love. But I wanted something that was going to be like a kind of a definite punch to the norms in the face. So what's that? You summon a demon and decide to get married.
That's such an interesting idea for a game. I did an entire I co-host a pod. It's on like hiatus right now, but my wife and I do a podcast called Pot of Love, and we do all 2 and 3 player basically romance related games. So like that game is definitely going to be on my. I don't know how. Usually our games fit into a larger narrative, and I'm not sure how that does, but we'll make it work somehow. It's definitely on my list now of 2 to 3 player romance relationship related games to play for sure.
Yeah.
It's such an interesting idea for a game. Such a creative idea, but that's such a cool to hear that story though, because it's such an amazing depth of dynamic, like that it has that personal background that I never would have guessed at looking at it. Like I just never would have thought about that.
Yeah, and then of course the question is like my wife says, well, does that make me the demon?
Yeah.
I'm like, no, it's not.
Yeah, no, but the idea of processing, I love game design for like process and gameplay for processing and healing, right? Like for taking these experiences and like processing them. I mean, I'm designing a divorce game because it's actually a breakup game. I always say divorce game first because I'm divorced, and for me it's a divorce game because it's like part of my healing of that.
Yeah.
But it could be any kind of breakup, really, honestly.
Yeah.
But I love that idea of creating games to help you process through and it's not always necessarily trauma or heartache or hurting, but a lot of times it is and can be.
Yeah, and I definitely think about that a lot within my gameplay because games are this wonderful space to explore things and to talk about things and to try on different identities and hats and areas and places. I do that a lot within my own role-playing games and within my games that I design is kind of like talk about and deal with like the emotions and feelings that I think come up with, consent of players and things like that. It's very dangerous to make your game into like a therapy session.
Yeah.
But like, I don't think that's fair to like throw that trauma onto another person.
Sure.
But I definitely, like another game that I have up on my itch currently was one that I made for Gabrielle's Matzah Jam.
Yeah.
And that one is called The Fifth Child. And that one is about looking and analyzing generational Jewish trauma. It's completely unplay tested.
Okay.
I have yet to be able to actually sit down and pick this up because I don't think I was personally ready to be able to sit down and play the game itself yet. Because it kind of asks you to like look at and analyze what are things of like you've inherited or you've experienced based off of being Jewish to be able to kind of just talk about it and confront it. And I think a lot of the things that happens within Jewish communities, within Jewish people, a lot of that is in response to the long generational trauma that Jewish people have faced. And so I wanted to kind of like create a game that kind of talks about that.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that's incredible. But to create a game that you need to be ready to play yourself even is an interesting it's an interesting concept, but it almost takes like the idea of game design and gameplay to a like different meta level where you can put a game like that out and then like the design's not finished, maybe in a sense, and you can, as people play it, they're participating in the design because, which is always true with playtesting, but it's like almost different when you've like put it into a game jam or something and now other people can play it and perhaps they have their own trauma
Mm-hmm.
Maybe even their own Jewish trauma and their like generational Jewish trauma, that their real life trauma contributes to the feedback that you get that helps like craft the game. That is powerful.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of like one of the special aspects of game designing during this time period is like websites like Itch allow for that kind of like, let's experiment, let's see where things go. And I love it. I absolutely adore it. I think it's such a wonderful and exciting thing to do.
You're totally right. I was actually thinking that, I don't even remember what it was, but I was just thinking about that earlier as even a question of like, how do you find, it's such an interesting time, right, to be in like analog TTRPG games, like, because the stuff, like the work that you're doing, I mean, it would have been just very different even 10 years ago, but like now it's just the possibilities are blown open for doing this kind of stuff, right? Don't you feel like, I just feel like it's so different now.
Yeah.
And available.
Yeah. The expanse of it is just amazing. And also the, the work regarding diversity is extremely slow when it comes to the larger names out there. But the fact that we're getting so many more stories out there that are necessary to tell is exciting to me. It's exciting to me as someone who comes from a biracial identity. It's exciting for me as someone who is from a minority group. It's just thrilling to see like these stories coming to life, and I'm so excited to see more of it.
Yeah, so I want to kind of dig in. Sorry, I'm just pulling up the dashboard. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm looking down, trying to pull up the dashboard on my phone so I can control, and I'm failing to do it so I can control. There, I finally got it. The itch from the Twitch from my phone. But I do want to kind of go back to talk about some of the religious stuff. I want to kind of dig in to your story, and I'd love to kind of dig into, you told it in a concise way. I'd love to know when you first sort of encountered, you described it as like going back into your family history, which is interesting, and then like discovering like your Jewish, roots. The discovering his, like, I don't know if Hasidicism would be the right way to put it, but that's really the right usage of that word. What was that like, and what drew you to it? What it's certainly a drastic life change, right? It's quite a choice. Just curious, what about sort of that presentation of Judaism, that way of being Jewish, like drew you to it and enamored you and you felt called to go into it?
That's a great question. I wish I could give it make sure that I give it an answer it deserves, but I was so kind of like part of this idea of like returning back to my ancestry and to my history. And so from my grandfather, he was very much an intellectual, and I kind of only knew him because he passed away before I was born from the books he left over. And it was really like he existed in my life based off of the stories I heard from my grandmother and from my mom and my aunt, who would tell me about his like passion for scholarship and knowledge. And I remembered I found he used to write notes in all the books that he had. So there was like his handwriting and in the margins of almost every single book that he ever owned. And I remember finding his copy of the Tanakh, the 5 books of Moses, I'm losing the sense of the English word for it, but what would I think people would call the Old Testament. So I found his copy of that, and I was like going through the notes that were in there, and that aspect of it kind of kicked off my search for Judaism, and I started picking up my own books for that. And then I got to a point where I think I was looking for a deep connection within Judaism that makes it kind of a central aspect of my day-to-day life. and as I was learning, I was finding the truth within it to be able to want to live this life of Torah and mitzvahs. And specifically, what really attracted me through it from the Chabad, I'm a Lubavitcher, a Chabad Hasidic sect or movement, is that it was like in their principle is that Chabad is an acronym for Chachma, Bina, and Das, which means wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. And it's a process in which a person goes through Torah through kind of using their intellect to kind of change their emotional feeling. So Jewish people, one of the first mitzvahs that we have in the Ten Commandments is to know that there is a God. And knowing that there is a God, that means that a person has to have kind of a relationship with the God, to have a love and fear of God. So a person could emotionally get to this form of love and fear through just kind of concentrating on an emotional experience of godliness, being excited about it, singing, dancing, all of these things would get a person emotionally changed. But if you want to see something permanent within yourself change, it only starts to get permanent when it's intellectually important for you. And that's what the Das part is. Das is knowledge in the Bible, and says that Adam knew Hava, and that is talking about their relationship. But the word that they do is knew, which is Das, knowledge, and that is the level of intellectual and connection that a person has to their Torah and mitzvahs. Is that you're doing it in a way that it becomes bound to you and part of you. And you're exploring and understanding godliness and how the world is a godly place through these mystical teachings. For me, that relationship to the service of godliness and the service of God really spoke to me, because it's an extremely deep emotional connection to it. And being a Hasidic Jew, it says that the Torah says, like, who is a Hasid? It's one who does above and beyond the call. You beautify every mitzvah. So it really doesn't become, I just want to do the bare minimum of my life. It becomes, I want to achieve the greatest and deepest connection that I can within Torah and mitzvahs.
I think that perhaps it's easy for people outside of Judaism to see the idea of following mitzvahs or, following laws, commandments, whatever, to be kind of an oppressive thing. It's very limiting and oppressive. It's like a lot. It's like a lot of rules to follow. It's a lot of things to have to do. And some of them I imagine are challenging, probably some more challenging than others. I could think of some that I know of, but just curious, what you say to that. If there's sort of a response to that as to that people might see it as outsiders in that way.
Yeah, I think for a lot of it, it does come back to this. What do you, and I speaking, to myself, like what do I want my relationship with God to be? And so here the Torah teaches us, like, God is this infinite aspect of all the good that we can comprehend and cannot comprehend. It is the true being that exists within the world, the creator of everything for every second. God has come and said, I have these ways that you can connect to me. So the word mitzvah in Hebrew comes from the root to mean to bond, to connect. And so when a person is involved in mitzvahs, they are connecting back to God. And so much like within a relationship, like a relationship between people, when you kind of understand and have this love for another person, you begin to love everything about them. And it's like the same thing with the things that they're involved in, the things that they're interested in. their passions and understanding. And when you get that aspect of it, you start to say, well, these are the things that they tell me, or that they want me to know, that this is what they love and this is what they want. And so when I think about that, that's what the mitzvahs are. This is God's expression for us to say, these are the things I want, I love, and you can come and connect to me and have a relationship with me through this. And so what happens then is that these mitzvahs, the commandments, then become moments of connection, and we can connect ourselves in everything and everywhere we do, because that is what God is. God is everywhere. The being a one and infinite God, that means that God has to exist in even the most minute details of our lives. So even from the ways that we cut our fingernails and toenails, there is a prescribed way that's supposed to be done. And so godliness, so everything becomes a godly experience, becomes a godly interaction and connection.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that. That's beautiful. I was thinking about I don't remember if my network co-founder, Josh Wise, who's a theologian, and I don't remember if this is from someone else or if he coined it. I don't know, but he'll say something. I've heard him say that God is both much further distant from us and much, much, much closer to us than we can possibly understand or imagine. And I do often, and I think about it that way. That's the way I often think about God and God's relationship as being both distant from me in a way that I can't comprehend, so other from me in a way that I can't comprehend, as not a creature like me in a way that I can't comprehend, and then also so much more intimate and so much closer to me than I can ever imagine.
There's a quote from one of the Rebbeim, the grand rabbis of the Chabad movement, and it said that Hasidus teaches how small a person is and how great they can become.
Wow.
And for me, that really is what, that's definitely, like, a person could have, they realize, I'm just this tiny little speck on a huge universe and infinite worlds and possibilities, and no matter, even because of that insignificant aspect, God said, I want to have a relationship with us.
Yeah. I don't get to always talk about religion this deeply on my show, which has religion in the name, and but oftentimes I just don't get to, so it's glorious when I do. I'm reveling in it. I'm also just curious about something I think about. I think I might have talked about this with Gabrielle when she was on the show, and Ben, about, and I'm just curious what your thought is about, your take is on it. I've always, as an outsider who appreciates Judaism and feels connected to it as a Christian, and that's a whole nother maybe conversation, but I feel like a connection to Judaism. I mean, I worship a Jewish man, right? So I feel like there's like a connection to Judaism there somewhere. Anyway, something I've always appreciated about Judaism that I think is striking about it as a religion is the way it tells story differently than Christianity. There is like something about that I struggle to put my finger exactly on it, but there's like something about the way story echoes from time to now. Like you see it in the Passover, right? And and just in the way I hear like Jewish people talk about scripture and treat scripture in worship and in theology, something about the way story is both past and present. And I've always appreciated that as something I think I really wish Christianity had more of that to it. But as I've been encountering Jewish game designers, I'm finding there is something about that element, that aspect of Judaism in game design I see come from Jewish game designers. Now, it could be that I'm I could be making a connection up. I don't know. It could just be in my head. I'm curious what your take is on that. If I'm touching on something that's real in Judaism, you think if you see it as an element of Jewish game design, or if I'm stretching it a bit, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I do want to preface that, you're talking to someone who has like a small section of Judaism. So
Sure,
I
sure,
can only
sure.
do the best in regards
Yeah,
to like my learning and understanding. But
fair, fair, fair.
there's, like as you could see from this, this is just small sections of it, so it's an infinite aspect
Well, it looks really
of
big on the screen,
information
so
creation. um, it is extremely. I feel it's very true because the Lubavitcher Rebbe, he one of the things that always came up in his Torah, his Torah discourses and talks, is that Torah comes from the terminology hara. Hara means a lesson, something to be learned out of. That if a person looks at the Torah as a historical document, it's a really bad historical document. It's a terrible historical document. It can't. So obviously from that, it's not historical.
Right. Yeah.
So and these things that we do, the mitzvahs that we do, the Passover Seder that we do, if it is a historical event, it really doesn't. It doesn't connect to why we continue this. Why a person does these things is because this very point in time, we are being talked to and learning, and the stories are about us right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the things that we do and the learning about it comes from trying to figure out and discover what is this trying to talk and say about me. And it's about us connecting ourselves back into the narrative of the stories that are there and to the lessons about what are we supposed to do in this point in time that we see ourselves. Because, this is, 3,000 plus tradition and lessons and stories. So the stories have to be true from like the periods of time when, computers and things like that didn't exist to the point that we find ourselves now. And the Torah is talking specifically to us at this very point in time. So for me, the role-playing games kind of also have this aspect of that within it, in which you're telling a story that someone said, here is my structure of the story. You can, and within these confines, you could tell this kind of story, and let it assist you to be able to discover the story of how that connects to you. And so you will create a world and characters who exist in a very finite, specific time, but it's structured within the parameters of this, like of the game, of the universe of the game. And I think that really connects back to like this concept of like kind of a Jewish view of narrative and storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was when I got to play Anashtana and we streamed it. We recorded our playthrough. We put it up on Holy Happy Hour. But when I got to play it, that was a little bit of an ad there for people to go look at the last two episodes of the show so they can see the playthrough of that. But yeah, it was just like the ability to step into, to take on characters from the Passover story, the ability to like take on Moses, but it wasn't Moses anymore. Like it both was and wasn't, in a way that I just thought was so powerful. Or my wife played Miriam, but it was and wasn't, and like that wasn't thing was so interesting because like I have Moses in my head, right? And the version of Moses in my head is obviously not. What is that? It's all of the Moses I've ever received from reading the Bible, from every sermon I've ever heard, from watching 10 Commandments on TV, from every Moses I've ever gotten is in here somewhere, and then like. To like take that and to like make it, I'm gonna play a version of my Moses that I'm gonna try to reflect then aspects of me in that, and also aspects of like what I think the story of Moses says to me was so powerful. Like it was so cool. I almost failed to say anything other than it was so freaking cool because it was. But there's something about that coming together of past and present that I just thought was really profound.
Yes, yeah. I do enjoy that aspect of Gabriel and Ben's game. When I played, I was fortunate enough to be able to play it. I played as Miriam, And it was so much fun to be able to kind of like take on like the kind of the vision of what you see these characters as, and just kind of like speak to them, and think about like, you know, what are the possibilities of dealing with this divine call, because that, you know, that's what the game kind of like inserts you into. You're in a moment in which you are the leaders, and you're both the leaders of trying to get an oppressed people out of a situation through God's decree, and you're also the people who are trying to keep those people oppressed, and fight against God. And I think that's an amazing example to be able to do.
And there's something about the freedom, like that's why I wonder. I just wonder, like I was thinking about this afterward, like how Christians would respond if you played a game like that with Jesus in it, and so many of them would be so, like, you know what I mean, would respond so poorly to it. But certain versions of Christianity, like, you know, would for certain. I just think that there's like a freedom there that I really appreciate, to take scripture and make it living, I guess would be the real, you know, that I like, because I guess I'm struggling to say that it's not so much, I don't know how, like, I don't think Christians do that very much. I think there's a lack of, and maybe it's not prevalent in, I don't know, maybe it's not prevalent anyway, maybe it's really prevalent in this game and in certain, like, maybe it's not as widespread as I'm giving it credit for, but like I just think like there's something about that I appreciate, and I think Christians are more hesitant to, certainly certain versions of Christianity that aren't my tradition are much more averse to like being flexible with what the Bible says. But even in mine, which is like a liberal tradition, you know, I still feel like there's a rigidity to approaching. I don't think there's a freedom to take the characters and adapt them. That sense of play isn't there. Anyway, I don't know. I'm kind of going off down a rabbit hole, down a tangent. But yeah, that's something I deeply appreciated and struck me as being an interesting thing about that. I think that, to me anyway, again, as an outside, again, I keep saying I'm speaking as an outsider, so I'm hesitant to do that, but it just strikes me as like, if you're going to say like, what are characteristics of, say, Jewish game design? Like, what does that mean? To me, that strikes me anyway as being, that feels right to me.
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, I also don't want to make a general statement, because, you know, like, you know, you could find someone else that could completely disagree, and you know, that's so Jewish.
There you go. But, exactly.
Yeah, but yeah, for me, it's really, and especially because of my background in coming into Judaism and things like that, it's my discovery of like, wow, this all like belongs to me, you know. Like I find myself in this point in time where I get to stand on the shoulders of these giants that existed before me, and I'm benefiting from this like vantage point. You know, we live in such an amazing time period of vast connection to knowledge and accessibility. You know, only maybe like 100 years, maybe 200 years ago, like no one had these books, you know, like just the access of knowledge, the ability to get things, it was so difficult. And I can have like almost this entire small library. This is a small one right here. I could have that on my cell phone now. And it's just like an amazing time period of being able to do that. So I think, we just have such a great ability to access our ancestry, our history, and to see how we are a connection and a continuation of that thing. And that's very strongly in Judaism, that our, like, the Passover story, really, the entire Passover Seder exists for one thing, and that is to tell your kids about Passover. So, like, to pass on this tradition. This is where your people came from. This is what happened and got your people there. And so like that part is really connecting me and everyone else back to their ancestry, and seeing how do we insert ourselves back into the narrative and see it going forward.
Yeah. Well, I actually that sort of touches on the question I had about kids actually. But before I get to that, I am curious about sort of bringing TTRPGs into like Hasidic spaces. Have you? I'm just
Hmm.
curious, like. What have you? How much you've gotten to do that? What that's been like? Is there a group of Are there young Hasidic adults playing, young adults, teens, whatever, playing RPGs in New York that are, just whatever.
Yeah,
I'm just curious.
definitely,
Yeah,
definitely there are.
that's really cool.
I think it kind of like when I started going into role playing games, I think it was still at that like, oh, only like nerds and losers do this, and there
Okay.
was still like this like nerd shame, I
Yeah.
think.
Uh huh.
And I kind of wonder if I think it's hard for people to understand like grown adults doing make believe and imagination, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
sad. It's
Yeah.
very sad.
Yeah.
Um, but I find that it ties back into Hasidic concepts so well because
Mm.
there is a process of what's called hisbonenus,
Mm.
which means like contemplation. That before when you learn something, you're supposed to think about it and you're supposed to visualize it within your mind, and that visualization allows you to have a deeper connection to the godly aspects. Um, and I think that really requires someone to practice and be a practitioner of imagination, of like contemplation and thinking and using your brain to be able to think about the possibilities of like spiritual worlds and things like that. So I
Mm.
find that role playing games kind of do assist within that, but they also help within kind of like I was saying earlier, talking about those tricky and tough subjects, or even not tough subjects, about like trying to like explain something to people that might just be foreign or weird to them.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see a lot of benefit within role playing games and
Yeah.
the Hasidic community. Whether I have a massive, I don't really have a massive Hasidic like gaming group, but there are others that do.
Yeah. Have you? Out of curiosity, is there any pushback in that community for TTRPGs? Because obviously, in the past, there has been in Christian communities. That's why I asked. But I
Yeah.
mean, that's mostly gone. I think, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know,
Yeah.
for certain
Yeah.
regarding that. I'm sure there definitely could be someone who
Yeah.
could be like do that,
Well,
but
even in the
yeah, I don't
Christian
know.
world, it was such a limited period of time. I think people misunderstand that. Although there may be some like radical, what I would consider more radical, like evangelical
Yeah.
Christian perspective that still boxes that out. I mean, there certainly was. Like I grew up in a version of Christianity that was like, you can't read Harry Potter because it's, I don't know, satanic or something.
Yeah.
So those versions of Christianity definitely certainly still exist.
Yeah.
But I mean, my friend, I have a friend who's a Baptist pastor who runs a Bible study, D&D Bible study at his church where they
Hmm.
play D&D and they based on scriptural lessons and talk about the Bible. And that's in a Baptist church, I mean, which, people consider a more conservative, church tradition. So, I think that stigma is gone in a lot of Christian spaces. Do you think it's gone just even the like, do you think that even the like role play games are for geeks, the geek shaming you're talking about? Do you see that as being largely gone? Do you still see that as being kind of hanging around?
In some places, I
Yeah.
think I still see it. I think it's like I said. I think we have an unfortunate society that kind of values this concept of work
Yeah.
over play, and I think
Hmm.
like kind of going back to this parenting example,
Yeah.
is that like a lot of what we do as parents involves teaching our kids through play,
Yeah.
and teaching our kids through they learn and experience the world for so many years through play.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of silly of us to think that goes away when we become adults.
Mm-hmm.
um and And so I think really that might be where the stigma is just like, it's thinking about people spending their time not doing serious work, and just like thinking that like, oh, you're just kind of like, especially when like minis, I suppose, are involved. Something about minis kind of like freaks people out. I don't know. Maybe like just having adult action figures is weird, but to them. But I think
okay.
like, yeah. So I think it still exists within that, but thankfully, I think we're seeing more and more people taking it to the mainstream.
Yeah.
And that really helps kind of normalize it and open it up to people.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's true. I think that's true. D&D itself is probably bigger than it's ever been, which is still weird for me. It's gotten so big that now people like me who grew up playing D&D and like saw that as our thing can now look down my nose. I can look down my nose now at D&D because I'm in the indie space now, and I can be like, yeah, D&D's bad now because I'm in the indie scene now. That's how big it's gotten that it can do that. It used to be too small to be able to be that. Which is funny to me, but certainly it's definitely it's bigger, more accessible than ever. I had another thought too. I was just thinking about how like, this irony is not exactly the right word, but like, the relationship we have to work that you're talking about and play. And right, like, so it's sort of not surprising to me that like the pastime of Americans is to like watch TV or do something mindless, because it's like, if I work or I just consume mindless media, which is also not play in a sense. Like maybe it can be, but like, and I'm a big fan of media, so like it's hard for me to even to say that. But so I'm certainly not judging. But I think there's something to that, right? That like the options for Americans is basically like. Or sports, I guess, but we even consume sports in a similar way that we consume entertainment.
Yeah.
Most of us aren't out there playing them.
Yeah.
In our neighborhoods and stuff. Most of us. So I feel like there's something to that. Do you feel like, one thing we talk about in the show sometimes is like, do you feel that religion is in the same sort of psychic or space or psychological space as play? Do you think it's like a natural... Like maybe I won't expand on the question actually. Do you feel like it's in the same sort of psychic space as play is?
So I have to say one of the areas that I got the most pushback from when I was becoming religious was from certain atheists, like people who were very much like, like, what are you doing entering into this world of make believe?
Yeah.
And so that was kind of an interesting experience in which, like, like they think like either you join some kind of cult or you like are just doing this kind of like infantile thing. It's not sophisticated or intellectual.
Right.
And a lot of that comes from, that there was an entire societal movement in Europe dedicated to making sure that religion looked like that.
Yeah.
So it was a purposeful design.
Right.
And we're still kind of experiencing that, or I've experienced that within there. So I definitely think that like religious people are looked at in a certain way.
Yes, I do think so.
But there's also another aspect in which religious literacy, and I'm kind of using it as the not like I'm kind of using it as an understanding of what religion is.
Yeah,
is very poorly grasped, especially I think in America.
Yes,
I might, once again, that's my main frame and focus. But I feel that everyone kind of has a very much Christian default, and so their entire understanding of religion exists within that Christian structure.
Yes,
and so I think. When people see me as religious, they immediately group it into, it must be like this.
Yeah. And a particular version of Christianity too, right? Like American evangelicalism, basically. A particular version of Christianity, which is such a small version of Christianity globally. You know, because I don't think people think of Roman Catholicism and Orthodoxy, and like, you know, they just don't have a conception of, like, say, Eastern Orthodox religion as being a version of religion that's in their like day-to-day conception.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a particularly very narrow idea of what Christianity even is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like a lot of people's, like when they become exposed to religion, let's say just based off of kind of like a normal like person's life where they go through college, they may take a like a religion 101 class.
Yeah.
A lot of the text and base things are from more of an anthropological study
Yeah.
versus a kind of asking the people who are that to kind of tell their stories.
Yeah.
And so even those people who get to have this breath of these are religions,
Yeah.
it's being filtered in very much like a this is what this one person believes, you know, like
Yeah.
it's kind of like a I don't want to say mocking, but it doesn't take the heart of the issue and say these are people's beliefs that are so central to who they are that it becomes an identity. And we have to treat it and to understand it with the same care and appreciation that they have. So, so yeah, that's what I kind of mean about the lack of religious literacy that happens within the country.
100%. And as you were saying about the idea of it being the anti-intellectualism, or like labeling religion as being anti-intellectual in some way, which is such a shame given like it's almost laughable how inaccurate that is historically speaking, given the breadth and depth of intellectualism contained within religious traditions, as just one, you know, as just one aspect of religious traditions, but just such a massive wealth of of thought about what it means to be a human being and human nature and philosophy. And I just think that we kind of lose, I think for a lot of people, they lose the accessibility to those traditions because because of the relationship between, say, the philosophical thought of that, you know, and it's the fact that it's religious, because there's a religious label on it.
Yeah.
It stigmatizes it. And then there's this sort of lack of access to a lot of our deep philosophical traditions in the world, that I just think we don't engage with because of that, which is sad to me. It's very, I think we miss out on a lot. Yeah, I mean, I think that, and there's an oppositional nature to Christianity in America too. So like, I think that people then lump all religion as being oppositional, right?
Yeah.
So then it's like hard to discuss religion, I think. This is sort of my take on it. Because there's this, people, I think, there's a default to assuming religion has this oppositional and evangelistic nature, this idea of like, well, you're going to tell me why I'm wrong and try to convert me. And so it's a scary thing to kind of engage in talking to someone about their religion.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I definitely have seen that and experienced it as well. Yeah.
I don't know how we share more, I guess. You know, how we expose people to the traditions right next door to us. You live in New York, where like right next door to anybody in New York City, you could just find the most incredible diversity of backgrounds and religion and ethnicity and things. And I don't know, how does someone grow up in America and like if they don't have a Jewish friend, how do they experience like, you know, Jewish tradition? I just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, like I said, we do live in a very special time in which that aspect have become so widely available and accessible. But it definitely is tough. I do think that a person's inward look into their own historical and ancestral backgrounds kind of does this offshoot in which they're able to begin to appreciate other people. Like, I know people who, like, once again, kind of like, that's very much like, oh, these religious Christians are like, they're kind of dumb because of their belief in these things, or these religious Jews are dumb because of their acceptance of this stuff. But me becoming a religious Jew made me understand there's a whole world of religious people, and their traditions and their faiths are are beautiful and should be accepted and tolerated and understood, and not like so looked down upon. And I think being able to develop that level of sensitivity is kind of the first part about that. And then it begins to allow a person to start exploring that, much like our person who doesn't live in a very like racially diverse neighborhood, you know. Mm-hmm. Like it is really up to that person to be able to gain the terminology, to words, and to the understanding of other people's situations and struggles.
Yeah. I just think that, sorry, I'm just thinking about my own. I'm thinking about my kids, actually, which is interesting because we talked about kids before. Just segue, like, you know, what my kids get exposed to. They get exposed to a diversity of people and stories. Well, one of the things I loved that you said was, like, not just like from a anthropological. I really deeply appreciate what you said about that. Not just like hearing about religion from an anthropological perspective, mm-hmm. but actually getting to hear, say, someone's faith. So different.
Yes.
And I just, that happens so little. I feel like. And yeah, I relish the ability to have that. I'll say as a Christian too, like, even though Christianity is the, you know, it's like the, I don't know, what's the way, how would you put it? We're the dominant religion, right, in the United States, or the most prevalent dominant religion in the United States. I hesitate a lot of times, and sometimes I think, like, I'm obviously very much a Christian in the gaming space, right? In the TRPG mm-hmm. space. I do a stream where I'm a priest and I use it as my handle and all these things. And sometimes I'm hesitant I'm very careful because, like, I don't, what's the way to put it? Like, I worry about assumptions that people make about me as a religious person, as a priest. Yeah. And I just wish I could have more freedom to just mm-hmm. be, like, fully my tradition and fully Christian, and not worry that I'm stepping on other people's toes by being that I can be all the way me and someone else can be all the way them. And that doesn't me being all the way me doesn't take away from them being all the way them. And I don't know, maybe because I am a Christian and we are maybe I need to be careful about that right now. Maybe mm-hmm. I don't know if you have thoughts about that. Maybe I need to be cautious because of my privilege. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there are aspects and angles in which a lot of people, you know, have privilege in different ways, in different scenarios, in different spaces. I am, you know, a cis male. That results in me having very specific privileges and situations. I'm, you know, Puerto Rican. That results in me having different privileges and situations, or Jewish, or within the community of Jews, gives me better access to things and information. So I think what I remember someone telling me that whenever you have the opportunity to stick your thumb on the scales of justice and to turn it in the right direction, you take that opportunity. Mm-hmm. So, like, for example, within our gaming community, because myself and the other individual working on it, Morgan, we had the ability to say, well, these are the games we're playing. We made conscious decisions to pick games from a diverse background of game designers. That it was specifically trying not to be and look all, you know, white male.
Yeah.
I think understanding where your privilege exists, understanding when it's activated, and how it can be leveraged and used to make this world a better place. It's very tough, and I don't, you know, I think that it definitely becomes difficult to sometimes see, but it's training oneself in that aspect of finding the eyes to realize for other people. And you know, it reminds me back of this concept of, like, Jewish charity. The Torah says that, you know, you giving money to someone else is nothing on you to feel proud about. This person accepting your money, they're doing you a favor, because without it, you don't have a mitzvah to do this. And so don't get all like egotistical about your ability to help someone else. Realize you were just given this money as a loan from God to give to someone else. And it doesn't belong to me. That money doesn't belong to me at all. That money belongs to God, who told me to give it to these other people. And so God has granted people opportunities and benefits to be able to give that to someone else.
Sorry, I laughed because I was so engrossed in what you were saying. I'm like, I forget how we even got onto that particular thing. I keep wanting to talk about about kids, and we keep dancing around it, not getting into it. But you mentioned having kids, so I guess I don't know how old your kids are, but I'm curious if you've gotten to do any role playing games with your kids, if that's something you get to do with your children.
Yeah. So. My kids range from 9 to 2.
Okay.
We do kind of we play games together. One of the ones that I like for kids is called Amazing Tales.
Oh, I don't think I know that game.
We use that one a lot, and I like it a lot because of its simplistic, like, kind of design and nature, and you can kind of tell whatever kind of story it is. A lot of times, what I will do would be I will take kind of a traditional Hasidic story that I know and wrap it up in the guy in a role playing game.
Oh, that's really
and
cool.
So we're like kind of like our Hasidic tales are kind of my like modules.
That's amazing.
I don't have to come up with anything.
Yeah. Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, and it's nice because I'm seeing kind of the kids take like what I've shown them doing storytelling and creation, and then they're kind of starting to run their own games between each other, and it's it's nice to see that kind of being passed on and just being able to do that, because so much of play is really about like, I'm going to like beat you, like even like looking at like a game like chess. The whole scenario of chess is you're trying to just kill the other side, like wipe them out. And so finding games that encourage collaboration, encourage that they win because everybody wins, that was very important to me as a parent. And I think role-playing games really offer that.
That's true. Yeah, there are some, I would offer them as interesting ones to find if I remembered the name of them. But when my oldest was little, I found some Mennonite games that were like designed by Mennonites to teach like cooperative and nonviolence, like cooperative nonviolent like thought pattern, like to encourage that kind of thinking for in through gameplay. I wish I remember the name of the company that makes them, because they make a whole bunch of them. They're like from a cooperative and nonviolent perspective, like Anabaptist tradition perspective, Mennonite perspective. But I was intentional with my, shamefully maybe, with my first child about that. Very intentional with my first child about that. I will admit that perhaps my third child, sort of, we do whatever works is what we do at any given moment. But I found such a tremendous value in role playing with my kids. Is so fun. It's such an amazing thing to be able to do with them.
Yeah, I mean, anything from like, I've developed a puzzle that requires them to do math to be able to solve it. So we're like learning math while we do this.
That's really cool.
Or teaching them to like, I give them a note and they have to read it, I 100% understand the kind of the like, like do I have time to be able to handle this and do this? And like, I wish I could do it more often. So I definitely can sympathize there. But like also using games to be able to say, you can't solve your problems through just punching them. Yeah. And that I think is like, I'm not insulting, the games that do that, because I understand the time and place for that kind of levels of fantasizing. But we live in a world where like, I hope most of the time you're not going to be able to use that as the way to solve problems, and we shouldn't be. And I think games kind of give you that ability to start training on or certain games can give you the certain ability to start training those muscles of like compassion and empathy, and finding games like that are just so wonderful to do.
Now, while I do think that TTRPGs give you a lot of that in like possibility in the space, of course, there is a fair amount of violence possible
Yes.
as well in
Yeah.
TTRPGs, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it could be beating your way through your problems.
Yes, and I definitely, I'm not saying I don't play those games.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
there's definitely like a place for them, and I understand them. And it's such a satisfying, easy like answer to it. But a lot of the games that I've had the most enjoyment out of really did not have that aspect in them. Like. Camden writes One Child Heart is an amazing game where you just have to show empathy and compassion for a child. Games like Whitney's Prism, Whitney Delgado's Prism. That one is also like, it has that, like, there's no violence track within it. I suppose you could, but like, that doesn't seem to be the purposeful point of it. Games that deal with kind of having conversations about love and romance, such as Alex Roberts, Starcrossed. Like those games, I feel it's just so interesting to take one of those games and to put it at a table, because we're so good at speaking in the language of violence, but when we want to speak in the language of like love and romance and
or just
compassion,
tenderness or connection,
it's so hard and it's so difficult, and I just think, what better place to start that than at a table where the biggest stakes are, I just lost 3 or 4 hours of my life to this game, and I think like playing games and saying I just want to practice these tools it's such a great opportunity.
I mean, there can be other stakes, as you said earlier on the show, accidentally making this into a therapy session or something like that, which are real possible stakes, and so hence the importance of safety tools for sure. But no, I totally agree that like getting to, I lost your phrasing you used, but getting to like try those things on, test the waters of those things the gaming table can be the container that holds that, the like trying things on, exploring things that you might never have explored in such an amazing way. So, well, I feel like that's probably a good period for the conversation. Can you tell people like where they can find you out there on the interwebs, or in Meet Space if you want, wherever?
So I'm on Twitter at Avrlog, Avrlogg. That's my Twitter. I have a link to my itch account from that Twitter. So if you want to see some of my games that I put up, I will, with the help of heaven, I think we'll be at PAX Unplugged this weekend, and I'll be at the Games on Demand section. Cool. I'll be running Trapped there. So if anyone is interested in trying out my game, I'll be there on Friday, Saturday night, because after Shabbos. Friday morning, Saturday night after Shabbos, and then Sunday. So if you're in the Philadelphia and at PAX.
I'm sorry that I will be missing you, because I'm in Philadelphia, but I'm not going to PAX this year, which was a hard decision that we made. I think
every decision that was made around going to PAX was difficult. The going there, the not going there. It's been tough, and it still is tough.
Oh yeah, definitely. And one of my friends is coming from out of town. He's going to be staying near me and going, so he'll be going while I'm staying home and seeing when he gets back. And I'll try to send him over to you to say hi to when he's there. But my wife and I, PAX Unplugged is so special to us. We've done panels at the last 2 physical PAXs that existed, and like to not go at all is such a tough thing. But it was we couldn't take our kids with us.
Yeah.
And it was a choice of like that was the choice for us. But since we can't take our kids, we're not going to go, and it was it wasn't an easy choice. But I'll miss seeing you there, and I hope it goes amazingly well, and you have a great time showing it, and of course that everything around it goes really well. Yeah, too.
Yes, please God.
Oh yeah, I'll be saying a lot of prayers for people who are at PAX.
Yep,
that people will be safe and healthy through PAX, and there won't be any downsides to it. Awesome. Well, thank you for making the time for sure to come on the show. I'm going to ask Avraham to hang around here in my digital green room, and I'm going to switch back over to just me on the screen here so I can say my goodbyes. I'm pulling my notes up here so I don't forget anything. But I want to, once again, just huge thanks to Avraham for coming on the show. I deeply appreciate him joining me this week, making the time. Please check out his itch. It is in the show notes already. You'll be able to check it out there, check out his games. If you are going to be at PAX, make sure you go and say hello. Maybe try to experience Trapped if you can. That's really awesome. And then, as we talked about, Gabrielle Rabinowitz on the show tonight and was on the show the last 2 weeks. Gabrielle, I believe, is also going to be at PAX Unplugged, and you can try to find her there as well. Please don't forget here on my channel on Twitch to hit the follow button. If you're watching, I'd really appreciate that. Or you could choose to subscribe if you wish. That's always deeply appreciated as well. If you only caught part of tonight's show, you will be able to watch it on demand for a brief time here on Twitch. But you can head over to allportsopen.com to watch every episode of Holy Happy Hour Batman after the fact, every episode in the series. Or you can find All Ports Open Network on YouTube. Our YouTube channel has all of the episodes there. You can also check out all the great shows on our network, including the one we're going to raid into here in just a few moments, the Monday night stream. But you can check out all of our great video content. Hey, if you want to see a game that I play tested, a game that I wrote that I'm play testing called Bizlandia, which is a Questlandia hack, called Bizlandia, that also is about creating a corporation. I didn't even talk about this, Avraham, on the show, but my game, you also create a corporation, it's a comedy game, so it's sort of the tongue-in-cheek comedy, but awful, but funny sort of side of that coin. Bizland, if you want to watch our playtest of that, we did it last week on the Monday stream. You can check that out on YouTube. It was super fun, and I'd love for you to check that out as we continue to playtest that game, which I hope to release at some point for you to play for yourself. Let's see, what else do I have here in my notes? Yes, huge thanks to Joshua Wise, my APON co-founder, for the artwork on my stream and for everything he does for the All Ports Open Network. Thanks to Doctor Octoroc for the use of his music on this show. I am That Gamer Priest, Ben. Come back next week. Same bat time, same bat channel, when I will be joined by the Church of the Geek podcast and ELCA pastor, Brian Bennett. So Brian will be on the show next week, Pastor Brian. Come back and be here for that conversation. It should be real fun. I think we might diverge from talking about TTRPGs all the time a little bit into some other geeky territory that we don't usually get into. Maybe some comic books. I don't know what else. We'll see what we do next week. But for now, enjoy the holiest and happiest of hours, my friends. Don't go anywhere. I'm going to put on the thanks for watching screen, but don't leave. And then I'm going to raid us right into the Monday night show here momentarily. Don't go anywhere.